Number 3. Danny Palm. In November 1995, 51-year-old Danny Palm was a retired Navy commander living in Spring Valley, a San Diego, California suburb. He and his wife lived in a neighborhood known as Dictionary Hill. For the past 2.5 years, Palm and other neighbors have been having problems with 48-year-old John Harper Jr. Almost immediately after he moved in with his elderly parents who lived in the neighborhood, he started to bully and torment his neighbors. At least 42 residents had a run-in with Harper. He aggressively tailgated them while driving behind them and veered into their lane when he was driving towards them. He had even driven some people off the road. When people went by his parents' home, he threw rocks and swore at them. He had even threatened to burn down someone's home. Danny Palm had 4 dangerous encounters with Harper. The first time, Harper, who was driving in El Camino, purposely veered in Palm's lane and nearly hit him head-on. The second time, Palm was the passenger in the car, and it was dark. They drove by Harper, who was parked on the side of the road with his lights off. Suddenly, Harper pulled up behind them with his high beams on, and he began tailgating them as they drove on a winding road. Palm's friend pulled over, and when Harper pulled up beside them, he apologized if he had done something to Harper. Harper supposedly told Palm's friend not to mess with him because he knew where he lived. Palm's third encounter with Harper happened in April 1995. Harper sped up behind him like he was going to ram him, and then he hit the brakes. He did this 3 times. Finally, in May 1994, Palm came across a car accident involving a car and a telephone pole. Harper was at the crash site, and witnesses said he caused the accident. Palm had a camera, and he took some photos of the scene, including Harper's pickup truck. Harper then threatened to beat him up for taking the photos. However, the confrontation did not become physical. Many people wanted Harper out of the neighborhood, and there was a meeting on how to accomplish that, but they had no legal recourse. Palm wrote several letters to the sheriff's department saying that Harper was a bully who terrorized the neighborhood. He wrote that if they didn't do anything, he was going to take matters into his own hands. In the summer of 1995, Harper was arrested for assault with a deadly weapon. He allegedly hit a woman's car while tailgating her. Harper went to trial in November 1995. The jury was deadlocked at 8-4. Instead of retrying Harper, he was offered a plea deal. On November 28, 1995, Harper pleaded guilty to misdemeanor reckless driving. He was given probation and fined $500. Harper then drove to his neighborhood. Palm claimed that Harper stopped in front of his home before driving to his own home. 51-year-old Danny Palm grabbed his gun and drove to Harper's home. He found Harper in his El Camino. Palm pulled out a .45 caliber handgun and walked up to Harper, who was still in his vehicle. Palm loaded a clip into the gun in front of Harper and then opened fire on him. When he emptied his clip, he put in another one and continued to fire. Harper was shot 8 times. The first shot was fatal. It was between Harper's eyes and it went through his brainstem. After Harper was shot, his El Camino rolled down a hill and hit a tree. People heard the gunshots and they called 911. After killing John Harper, Danny Palm threw the gun into a canyon and returned home. About 2 hours and 40 minutes after the shooting, Palm was arrested at his home. He claimed he didn't remember the shooting because he had blacked out. Palm was charged with first-degree murder. He went to trial May 1996. Palm's lawyer claimed he had acted in self-defense. The prosecution argued that it was clearly premeditated murder. Palm, armed with a gun, drove to Harper's home and opened fire on him. Harper was unarmed and wasn't being aggressive. Several of Palm's neighbors testified about the harassment at the hands of Harper. The trial lasted a month, and the jury deliberated for 3 days. Palm was acquitted of first-degree murder, but he was convicted of second-degree murder. He was looking at a minimum of 15 years to life. Many people were not happy with the verdict. Several of Palm's neighbors wrote letters to the judge requesting leniency. His sentencing hearing was delayed for nearly a year. In April 1997, Judge William Mudd did something surprising. He overturned the jury's verdict. The judge called Harper a jerk and ne'er-do-well who had frightened his neighbors. He also said, quote, "Occasionally, in the real world, victims bring about their own death," unquote. Judge Mudd found Palm guilty of manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. According to parole rules at the time, Palm was eligible for parole after serving 8.5 years. 60-year-old Danny Palm was released in 2004. Number 2. Noel Estevez. Noel Estevez and Timothy Crump were both 14 and they lived in the Bronx, New York. For a while, they were friends. They liked to skateboard together and spend time on their computers. They had at least one sleepover. Both boys came from troubled homes. Noel's mother had problems with drug addiction and had been arrested several times. In spring 2013, Noel's older brother, Justin, died from a drug overdose. There are conflicting reports about Timothy Crump. Some people said he was a quiet, shy kid, while others said he was a troubled child. In December 2013, Timothy had been suspended from school for 3 months. When suspension ended in April 2014, he didn't return to class. Although Timothy was suspended, he loitered around the campus at times. Then, in early 2014, Timothy and Noel had a falling out. Timothy had given Noel a stolen iPhone to hold on to. Some reports say that Noel borrowed the phone. Noel's mother claimed that Timothy hurt someone while he was stealing the phone. So when she found the phone, she threw it out. Timothy was angry about the loss of the phone, so he and his friends began to torment Noel at both home and school. They came to his apartment and banged on his door. They also tried to break in. They yelled insults and death threats. Timothy and the other boys would make fun of Noel stuttering and say insulting things about his mother. Several times they urinated on his apartment door. When Noel left the apartment, they would chase him and attempt to assault him. Noel eventually started barricading himself in his bedroom and stopped eating. In May 2014, around the anniversary of his older brother's death, Noel's father found him hanging from a belt in his closet. He was taken to the hospital and he spent 2 weeks getting treatment. He was diagnosed with depression, bipolar disorder, and psychotherapy. He stayed home from school for another week after getting out of the hospital. During the 3 weeks he was away from school, Timothy and his friends continued to come by his home and do things like urinate on the door. Before the bullying started, Noel loved school and had an award for perfect attendance. But Noel told many people he didn't want to go back to school because he was sure that Timothy and his friends were going to kill him. Noel's family tried several times to get help. Noel's mother tried to file a police report, but the police said that since nothing physical happened between the boys, there was nothing to report. His mother also went to the Administration for Children's Services, also known by the acronym ACS, but they were unable to do anything to help her. On June 17, 2014, Noel's father asked the principal of Noel's school if Noel could be transferred to another school for his safety. The principal said no because the school year was nearly over. The next day, after being away for 3 weeks for psychiatric care, Noel returned to school. At the time, his mother was incarcerated. Noel desperately did not want to go to school, but his father forced him to go. The school day was uneventful, and the last bell rang at 3 p.m. Then 14-year-old Noel and 14-year-old Timothy encountered each other on the sidewalk outside the campus. The two former friends started to argue. Then Timothy attacked Noel. He struck him 4 or 5 times, including punching him in the face and kneeing him. Noel had brought a 6-inch kitchen knife with him to school. He pulled it out, either from his pocket or backpack, and stabbed 14-year-old Timothy in the chest and abdomen 4 or 5 times. Timothy tried to run away, but fell after a few steps. Many children were watching the altercation, and when they realized what was happening, they started screaming and ran away. This caught the attention of the school staff. Noel, who didn't run away, was disarmed by a security officer. An ambulance arrived, and Timothy was taken to the hospital. 14-year-old Timothy Crump was pronounced dead a short time later. Noel was charged with second-degree murder as an adult. Noel admitted he had stabbed Timothy. He said he feared for his life, and he was acting in self-defense. The police investigated Noel's claims of being bullied. The school claimed that they did not know about the bullying. However, the police talked to an ACS worker who claimed they informed a guidance counselor at the school about the bullying claims. One problem is that Timothy was rarely in school after his 3-month suspension. Also, most of the bullying and harassment happened outside the school. Noel's family, neighbors, and people who worked in his apartment building also said that Timothy and his friends had harassed Noel for months. The ACS caseworker also said that Noel's mother had tried to file a police report. In June 2014, there was a grand jury hearing. A grand jury in New York reviews evidence presented by the prosecution whether there is enough probable cause to charge someone with a serious crime. At the hearing, Noel testified on his own behalf about the months of harassment he suffered and how terrified he was to return to school. His lawyer also pointed out that Noel and his family had tried to get the school, the police, and the ACS to help with the situation, but no one intervened. His lawyer said that the system had failed Noel, whom he called a victim and a survivor, and he did something desperate after months of bullying. Also, the physical fight that led to Timothy's death was initiated by Timothy. If Noel were to be convicted of second-degree murder as an adult, he could have been sentenced to 25 years to life. The minimum sentence is 15 years to life. However, the grand jury voted to indict Noel on the lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter as a juvenile. Since the juvenile records are not public, the results of the charges and sentence were not made public. Typically, a juvenile found responsible for an offense like manslaughter might be placed in a secure juvenile facility until age 18 or 21. That means Noel Estevez would have spent, at most, 4 to 7 years in a juvenile center. His current whereabouts are unknown. Number 1. The Residents of Skidmore. Skidmore is a small town in northwest Missouri. In 1981, the population was about 435. It was home to the McElroy family. Kenneth Rex McElroy was the 15th of the 16 McElroy children. He exhibited behavioral problems when he was young. Teachers thought he was mean, and he believed he could do whatever he wanted. He often stole from other students. Ken was held back twice in the 5th grade. He dropped out in the 8th grade and started stealing grain, which he would resell. He then moved on to cattle and hog rustling. He only had one honest job in his life. For most of his adult life, he ran rackets where he would steal from his community and resell what he stole. Around 1969, he started sexually abusing 12-year-old Trina McLeod. He was 35 years old at the time. Ken and Trina tried to get Trina's parents' permission to date, but they said no. Not long after, Trina's parents' home burned down and their dog was shot. When Trina was 14, she became pregnant with Ken's baby. She dropped out of high school and moved in with Ken and his wife, Alice. Supposedly, Alice and Trina got along well. Ken was worried about being charged with statutory rape, so he took Trina across the state line to Kansas, where he married her. Trina was his fifth wife. He had between 16 and 19 children. According to several people, McElroy was violent with all 5 of his wives. Besides stealing from people in the area, Ken also tormented them. On July 27, 1976, 41-year-old Romaine Henry was driving near his home, and he came across Ken on the road with a shotgun. Ken accused Henry of coming to his property. Henry had no idea what he was talking about and told him so. Ken then shot him in the stomach. He aimed the gun at Henry's head and fired again. Henry ducked, but the pellet struck him in the forehead and the cheek. Henry managed to escape. He went to the hospital and he survived his injuries. Ken was arrested and charged with assault with intent to kill. Ken's lawyer got the trial delayed, so it was scheduled nearly a year later in August 1977. During that year, Ken harassed Romaine Henry and 2 other witnesses who saw him in the area. A week before the trial, someone put sugar in the gas tank of one of Henry's tractors. By the time Ken went to trial, only one witness besides Henry agreed to testify. That witness did not see the shooting. He just saw Ken in the area around the time of the shooting. Ken testified he was at home at the time of the shooting. 2 men verified that Ken was at home because they were there with him. Ken McElroy was found not guilty. Skidmore's grocery store was run by Ernest Bo Bowenkamp and his wife, Lois Bowenkamp. On April 25, 1980, 2 of Ken's daughters came into the store. His 4-year-old daughter was going to walk out with a candy bar that they hadn't paid for. Lois told her older sister she couldn't take it out of the store without paying for it. The older sister put the candy bar back and then left the store. When Ken and Trina heard about the incident, they went into the store. Ken had a large knife which he played with while Trina screamed at Lois, Bo, and another employee, condemning them for accusing her daughter of stealing. For the next several months, Ken harassed Bo and Lois at their store, in the town, and at their home. This included firing guns near their home. The Bowenkamps reported the incidents to the police, but nothing was done. On July 8, 1980, Bo Bowenkamp celebrated his 70th birthday. That evening, he was cutting boxes at the store. Unprovoked, Ken McElroy shot him in the neck with a shotgun. Bo survived the shooting and identified Ken as the shooter. Ken was arrested and charged with aggravated assault. He was released on bail the next day. While on bail, Ken harassed Bo and Lois, their family, and other witnesses who saw him at the store minutes before the shooting. Ken would also go into the tavern in Skidmore and talk about killing Bo. Ken went to trial in June 1981. He was looking at the possibility of a life sentence. Ken claimed he had acted in self-defense. He said that the 70-year-old man came at him with a knife. The prosecution said that Bo did have a knife because he was cutting up boxes, but pointed out that the evidence showed that he never moved close to Ken and he had never acted aggressively. The jury found Ken guilty and recommended a sentence of 2 years in prison. The judge could only lower the recommended sentence, not raise it. The sentencing hearing was to be held later, and Ken McElroy walked out of the courthouse. He went to the tavern in Skidmore, where he claimed he was going to get the conviction overturned. He claimed he had been arrested for over 53 felonies, and this was the first time he was convicted. The people of Skidmore were shocked by the outcome. After decades of harassment and stealing from them, Ken McElroy had nearly killed a 70-year-old man who ran a grocery store over a grudge that Ken's family had created. Ken continued to go to the tavern and boast that he was going to get away with shooting Bo. Then, on July 9, 1981, more than a week after the trial, Ken came into the bar with a rifle with a bayonet affixed to it. The next day, there was a meeting at Skidmore's Legion Hall to talk about how they could protect themselves from Ken McElroy. There was around 60 people, including the mayor and the sheriff. When the meeting finished, the sheriff got into his car and drove out of town. While the meeting was happening, Ken went to the bar with his wife, Trina. The townspeople left the hall and went to the bar, which was serving beer free of charge. Ken and his wife, Trina, left the bar and walked towards their pickup. As they walked out, several of the townspeople followed them and surrounded the truck. Then the scene erupted in gunfire. Trina, who was in the vehicle when the shooting happened, was helped out of the car and was uninjured. No one called for an ambulance. It probably wouldn't have mattered because 47-year-old Ken McElroy was dead from at least 8 gunshot wounds to the head. No one was arrested in the wake of his murder. Although there were 30 to 46 witnesses and Ken was shot in broad daylight in the center of town, no one said they saw anything. Many said when they heard the shots they put their head down. They only looked up after the shooting was over and no one saw any guns. When no arrests were made, a task force was started, but it was not very successful. The task force had a major problem with ballistics. The only thing they could determine was that guns of 3 different calibers were used. The guns and shell casings were never found, so the task force didn't even know how many shooters there were. Most people believe it was 2 to 4 shooters. One witness identified a shooter. That was Ken's wife, Trina. Trina claimed she saw a local man, Del Clement, raise his gun and fire. Clement was a member of a prominent ranching family in the area. He was never charged with murder. No one else has ever been charged with murder. In many interviews after that fateful summer day, Skidmore residents claim they don't know who the shooters were. Or if they do know, they'll never tell anyone. It's been 44 years since Ken McElroy was killed, and it's highly unlikely anyone will ever be charged with his murder. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Also, don't forget to watch our shorts on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Once again, thank you for watching.